大家好，我是 Emily 王蓉。We have Jake 高健 from Skritter today to join us to discuss the questions about learning Chinese, which are submitted by GoEast students. And in the end, we're going to analyze some handwriting from the submissions from GoEast social media. So please keep watching to the end to see what we're going to talk about. OK, 高健高老师 I
嗨，
can call you
王老师，
高老师, right?
可以。
Because I think besides running Skritter, deep in your heart, you're still a Chinese teacher.
Yeah, I think so. At least I used to be.
Yeah, and then okay, gosh. So we know like 汉字 writing learning, character learning is a huge part of learning Chinese. So we do have a few questions from Go students, and hopefully we can give them some very good insights. Okay, the first
I think
one
we
is
can.
submitted. Yeah, the first one is submit is about, of course, everybody cares about best way to learn Chinese characters. So the question they ask is which one is the best way to learn? Flashcards or handwriting or Skritter?
I think so. Obviously, I am very biased as the CEO of Skritter in how I reply, but I like to think about this question. First, let's just start with handwriting versus flashcards. And from my own personal experience, when I started learning Chinese, I was all in on flashcards. This was back in like 2006. And there wasn't a lot of, I didn't have a smartphone at the time. There's not a lot of technology around. So I used handwritten flashcards and I used writing paper and grid paper. And I ended up like just endless repetition, 不断地重复, and I would write them over and over and over again. And that was the way I think when I grew up, learning ABCs, right? This was kind of the process that we used. And it worked in the short term in terms of the next day I could recall and remember a lot of characters. But come a couple weeks later, a couple months later, the characters that I wasn't writing a lot, I would completely forget. So that was a big problem. And so I think that, even though I was making flashcards and I was studying flashcards like that, it wasn't very efficient. Obviously, we have technology these days like apps like Skritter, and that uses spaced repetition systems. So it's a learning algorithm, and how well you do on different cards, it adapts to you. So it's trying to make sure that you don't forget things, so that you don't have to spend hours and hours and hours handwriting on paper. Just in my own personal experience, I started using Skritter later on when I was studying. And I would use it for about an hour a day during grad school, but I was able to retain information a lot more efficiently and a lot more quickly. And so by the end of a couple months, I was able to go in and sit down and take a 3-hour handwritten exam and not feel like an idiot. And I think that was a huge testament to how effective Skritter is, and also flashcarding in general. I think handwriting, certainly we need the muscle memory so that we can do it. And there comes a time and a point, depending on your class schedule and everything else, where you probably do want to focus on writing on paper. But if you're trying to learn characters efficiently, then I think using digital medium, using flashcards digitally is a lot more efficient. Skritter is a great balance between all of this. You can handwrite, but you can do it with your thumb on the subway or on the bus, or while you're doing whatever during the day, which is a really cool process. But it's more about getting the stroke order right, recognizing the characters so that you can go out and use them and read them in context, and just apply what you're learning a lot more efficiently. So I think these days, you certainly, it's fun to handwrite characters, but you got to do it efficiently, and we're going to get into that a little bit more later. So I would say these days, Skritter all the way, and flashcarding, like SRS system. Go find an SRS system, do that, and work on be smart with your study time. We only have so much time per day, so let's take advantage of it as best as we can.
Yeah, I see. So you really emphasize efficiency. So the most efficient way to learn would be like using really technology,
Yeah, I
like
think
apps
so.
like Skritter. Yeah. So like for me, based on my teaching experience, we'd like to when you come to learn, we actually ask what's your goal of learning something. So we really like to set up the goal first. So when it comes to Hanzi learning, actually there's a few goals. We ask our students, what do you want to achieve? So people actually don't understand, maybe neglected. So when you say you learn characters, there's actually 4 types of goals we usually tell our students. One is like your goal is to recognize the character. So which means like when you see a dialogue, see some materials, you can know what this word is or the sentence is. And the second one is identify, or we call it type. So when you use pinyin to type, you can actually select the right words. And the third one is actually intimate like writing. So like when you see the character, you can recreate it like efficiently. And the last one, a lot of people don't know, is like to write beautifully. That's a different skill, you know.
Yes.
So I think
yes.
a lot of people, when they want to do handwriting on paper, they're actually emphasize really the last one. So different things like serve different purposes. So it depending on what purpose you want. So I would say like things like flashcards, or even you have a teacher who explain the characters to you, or like you have a lot of supplementary reading materials. They all serve the first 2 goals, to help you to recognize characters or to type characters. And I do like Skritter. Like it's like you combine all of server like goals together. Like
Yeah, we do put them together, and because Skritter, we're taking an approach where we do split things apart, right? So when you're coming in, and similar to what you're saying, recognition, so being able to see a character and reproduce, okay, what is the reading of this character? What's the pinyin? What's the pronunciation? What's the meaning? That is definitely covering the first 2 phases of what you're talking about. And then we come into the, can you trace this character, or can you reproduce this character we have guided strokes in Skritter. So there's a little bit of leniency on the canvas, which is really helpful for being able to allow you to do things like write with your thumb on a subway, so that you're getting the input and the recognition, but you're not worrying about that kind of final phase. And then, of course, when you were talking about beautification and making these characters look, well balanced and have nice structure, and someone looks at, wow, 你写得真漂亮, right? That's a whole separate thing, and it really does require a lot more time and energy. And I think maybe early on, or at least like when we're in this beginner, intermediate level, even certainly, just it kind of depends. If we start too early on that beautiful part, then we can really get bogged down. It's like maybe we don't have a firm grasp of this character's pronunciation, the meaning, how it works. We're not comfortable with this character enough yet to really kind of dig in, but we want to make something really beautiful. So we end up kind of like me early on. We spend all this time writing over and over again, but we don't have the foundation, the 基础 yet to really get to that point of beautiful handwriting, which is a little bit tricky, right? So where does that come in? And I think we can certainly talk about that a little bit more in some of the other questions that the students raised. But yeah, absolutely. I think goals are really important. I mean, in at its core too, knowing what you want does certainly make it easier to get to where you want to go.
Yeah, that's true. And then like you said, like you write on the screen, right? That also helps you to remember. That's like kind of input. So like you really need a lot of input to be able to really output what you're learning. So we definitely think like you need to set the right goal, and like kind of a combination of all the tools if you can use to achieve this goal. And then of course learning by doing is something we emphasize a lot at GoEast. So even if there's like sometimes you don't have your phone, we do think like if you can write on a paper, just like it's a soothing not really like when you are in a hurry or you really emphasize efficiency, but like a kind of soothing, and then to really get the chance to expose to the most writing things you can ever get. So that's will be very good. Yeah,
I like, still to this day, if I get like a piece of junk mail, I totally use the envelope and just have it there, and we'll grab a pen and got a few minutes here and just I'm gonna write some of my favorite character, write some phrase that I'm working on with my teachers or whatever. And just it is a really soothing, relaxing experience, and you feel a sense of accomplishment at the end. Certainly you can look down and say, hey, I wrote this. I'm writing in Chinese, which feels really cool, no matter what level you're at, I think. So
Yeah, definitely. Great. So I guess the best way to learn is like use a tool like which suits you the best, but like understand what is your goal and really
yeah.
use the technology you can get to help you. Oh,
Yeah,
great.
I do think it's really important in
Yeah.
that process, and experimentation too, right? Like finding a method, and maybe just depending on what stage you're at in your learning journey, then you can switch things up. It's always good to look back and reflect and say, hey, is it time to try something new or whatever? But certainly.
对，说的对。Okay, the second question. People really ask, do I have to learn characters if I just want to speak? What do you think? What do you recommend?
Yeah, so I think if you're a student and you want to be studying Chinese seriously, I think that this is something where it is a 100% definitive yes. Do you need to learn how to handwrite them? No, maybe not. You should probably learn how to handwrite some characters so that you're familiar with them, and I think we can expand upon that a little bit in the stroke order conversation. But in today's digital world, right, learning to read and write is just a critical part of how you communicate, like email, social media, text messaging, whatever. This is generally, I mean, we had so many back and forth emails before this conversation, and how would have that been possible if we didn't know how to read and write to each other, right? So there's so much information out there that needs to be processed visually, and in that sense, you absolutely have to learn how to read. And be able to recognize things and figure out how to process this information. So yeah, I think, handwriting aside, you got to learn how to start, recognizing characters. I think a lot of people that don't, and they go, I'm only going to speak, that's all I care about, are you traveling in China or Taiwan or something? Like, okay, that's one thing. But if you're there, seriously, you're living long term and you want to learn this language, eventually you have to get there. And so many students that delay regret it, and they go, oh, if only I could do it over again, I would have started to recognize characters a lot earlier. At least that's based on a lot of people that I talk to and hearing people talk about their study process. It's like recognition of characters definitely comes up time and time again as one of these things of like, I should have started earlier. 那王老师你觉得呢？
Yeah, I think I can agree more. But my perspective is a little bit different. I want to provide a bit of like native speakers perspective. So I think one thing as a learner, you need to understand pinyin is not really Chinese. It's a tool created recently back in 1950s to help someone to learn Chinese. So if you don't know the characters, actually you are like illiterate, like in Chinese, right? And the literacy rate in China is actually as high as over 97% last year. So, and then as a Chinese person, like you actually meet, if you type all the pinyin to them, they won't understand it at all. And then if you tell them you can't read or can't type or can't write like characters, they were like, who are you? Are you my nai, my grandma, right? Like it just feels so dated.
Yeah.
So I think for this reason also like as a supplementary point, like it's really suggested that you learn characters for sure. 学习汉字版. But like you said, like right, like it could be like the goals could be different. Just recognize and type, not like really handwriting everything. And also we think like the learning order can be kind of altered, suits your needs as well. So like at GoEast we will say like speaking first, then like writing and reading. So our first two beginner classes actually we only teach pinyin and like those kind of conversation skills. So you can start with some basic conversations and really try to meet people, try to understand something, have nice conversations. Then like we will do the Hanzi course. So you will learn like the first 300 basic characters and then really catch up with your speaking skills. And at the same time, like to deepen everything you've learned, the grammars, reading skills, everything.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, all the skills like comprehensively would be improved. Yeah.
Yeah, certainly.
So,
and I think depending on when you're starting in this project, if you're just starting out, absolutely speaking first, get comfortable with the language. And we do have to use, pinyin is a useful tool for getting us comfortable with the sounds that are being produced in Chinese and be able to look at something and produce that and have a conversation. But where we put in the emphasis on the recognition and typing and things like that, like you don't want to delay it too long. And it sounds like you're doing the exact right thing, right? It's like start out, get conversational, get comfortable with listening to the language and hearing the different sounds and the different pronunciation and being able to distinguish tones. These are all really important things that are really hard to do when you're just in a vacuum of characters on a page. But once you're comfortable with that, and certainly there's it's not like you have to be 100%, I can have a full conversation, I'm fully fluent in listening and speaking, and now I'm going to read. No, probably don't need to do that. But, delaying it a little bit. But eventually, yeah, it's time to dig in and get to that other element of the language, right? It's not just speaking and listening. It's reading and writing and, walking, especially living in China or Taiwan, you walk outside and there's no pinyin anywhere. There's just not pinyin. This is not how it works. So you got to get comfortable with these characters and how they work. So you can start, interacting and, find what you want on a menu or where you're going on a map or whatever it is, right?
Yeah, totally. So just remember, like, pinyin is not real Chinese. The characters are.
Yeah, exactly.
And then, since we emphasize characters so much, so one thing I think a lot of students when they're learning is we do have a set of rules for the stroke. The stroke orders, right? So should we actually really emphasize on stroke orders? The 笔画 is really important. What do you think?
Super important. Yeah, super important. I think there's several different things. So there are rules that, so stroke order, it's a guided set of rules and it helps us. And I think by studying stroke order and understanding stroke order, there's a couple different benefits that happen. One is we understand, we can, at that point, it unlocks certain abilities that we can do. So if we were to look up a character in a dictionary and we want to use the handwriting input, right? You need to have the correct stroke order for that to be possible. I was not going to recognize it. Additionally, it's very helpful I think that as you're learning stroke order, it starts to give you a sense of even just how characters are constructed and formed, right? So you're starting, it's like left, right, top, down, outside, inside, closing strokes, all these different kinds of things. And that's oftentimes also how characters are structured in terms of the forms and the components that are in them. So a lot of characters these days are phonetic, semantic, one part is the sound or, phonosemantic. So one part is the meaning, the other part is the sound, and they come together and they're either top down or left right. And that structure, and the more that you write in correct stroke order, the more you tend to understand this process and how these chunks fit together to form modern characters, a lot of them. I think another benefit of learning stroke order is you don't have to the mental energy that you need to acquire a new character gets reduced significantly. You're not trying to make up a way to write something that you don't know. You're applying a set of rules and a logic system, and you're saying, okay, yeah, I see this character and I know how to write it almost immediately. We don't have to think about it anymore, which is really awesome. Added benefit, if someone writes you a handwritten note or you want to read a font that is not perfectly typed or created by a computer, then knowing stroke order is super helpful for sloppy handwriting and being able to dissect that because people write with the same stroke order. And so if you know the stroke order, then you can almost take something that's a little bit, maybe it's not written perfectly, but you can kind of follow along and see this, and you've maybe written it a little sloppy yourself, so you can recognize what is being written here as, and I think when it comes into typefaces and things like that, and people that do more artistic stylizations, it's really critical to understand how characters are written and put together in order to be able to read that stuff.
Yeah. Those are really good benefits. And I would like to see, I understand why people ask those questions, because sometimes rules just sound boring. You want to be the innovator, you want to break rules. But sometimes rules also means organization and a starting point for you to follow and to build. So this is also true for character 笔画, the stroke orders. Because actually it's very simple. There's only a few of the rules. So you follow along those ones and you give all the benefits you've already described. I think when you're learning, just follow those core rules. And then when we were young, as Chinese kids, the teachers like to test you those exceptions. Like something like breaks the rules, and then the teacher was like, "Yeah, gotcha." Like you didn't remember this one, but I think like now, like our method is different, right? It's not like you have to be 100% on different stroke orders, but like just know the main ones, know the core ones, to know the things to make an order for you to help you remember or to help you talk about those characters, or like eventually when you are really into the art of writing, like I said, right, like when you started like a calligraphy or something, the order matters even more, because that's how the aesthetic parts are actually formed, right? The length, the weights, the size of each order creates the balance or the structure or the look of your characters. So that would be like a really important, like, so it doesn't really hurt to get the knowledge of that, of the 笔画, and then follow along. But later, I think like you don't have to know everything except especially the like all the special ones. Yeah. So that's our.
I think quick like补充here for the way that we approach it in Skritter is we always so we have some variations in stroke order in terms of there are some strokes like you said, and oftentimes this comes from calligraphy or more of like 草书 or 行书, this writing style where things kind of get combined together, or maybe you're writing there's some variations that can happen, these gotcha moments, but in general, in Skritter, for us, we absolutely enforce stroke order from day one, and you really learn it. We have a whole deck and a guided course on the stroke order rules with a ton of high frequency character examples. But as you're writing with technology, it becomes so much easier because you're not really thinking about that anymore. We're enforcing the proper rules so that it just kind of becomes ingrained in your brain and more. And so many students tell us like, I don't even have to think about it, right? It's just comes very naturally in that way. So starting with that solid foundation and as you study, it just becomes just a general part of your process for learning. But it is super, super, super important in that way. And these are some of those rules where it's probably not best to be broken. Don't make up your own way. Just use this way. It's been working for a very, very, very long time.
Yeah, it works for thousands of years. Yeah. Correct. So like okay, so we like, I know like actually I like GoEast students, like, or a lot of people really know like you should get started learning, and you already on the way of learning. So people want to have a preview of like what's in the future. So like they ask like, do Chinese characters get more difficult or actually get easier when you keep learning, when you're at an advanced level?
Yeah, I think like certainly there are exceptions, some characters, and a lot of so when I was in grad school, a lot of my research was on character acquisition theory, and so like pouring over all this data about things. And I do think that the more strokes inside of a character, if you don't understand kind of character theory and formation theory, they are typically more difficult in kind of first experience with them, and how much time you might take to acquire them, and not by orders of magnitude, but like, a character with a lot of different strokes in it is a little bit trickier to visually process and maybe like understand and produce written down. But we're gonna make some mistakes along the way. But I do think that if you understand how characters work, and you understand the shape and the structure of characters, you understand stroke order, you understand that there are components that lend themselves to the meaning, and there are components that lend themselves to the sound, you start seeing that these things show up time and time and time again in different characters. Even like our basic, four-tone example, ma, 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 ma. They all have ma, horse, in it. And that's the phonetic component. So like learning that one character, which is a pictograph, lets you really easily learn 4 characters. 3 extra characters after you learn one character, right? And so we're taking those things. And so similarly, if we have, now we take the, for ma, for mom, we take nu, and we can use that component in tons of other characters. So by learning a lot of basic characters, pictographs or like huizi, like ideographs that have basic meaning, those characters start showing up again and again and again in other characters. So I think generally speaking, if you're following, again, I'm efficiency at this point, like thinking about it, but if you are paying attention to those kinds of things when you start learning early on, then it's not something that gets harder and harder as time goes on. I actually think that it gets easier and easier as time goes on, and we end up spending less time focused on, oh my gosh, how am I going to remember this character? And it's more like, how am I not going to confuse this character with this other character that looks similar, or how am I just remember the times where the pronunciation's a little bit weird. We have like bigger things to worry about at that point. But I do think it gets easier as time goes on, especially since, the first 300 like so many, maybe it's like 800, 900 characters, like they cover a huge percentage of the language already. And generally speaking, in modern Chinese, there's about 3,000 different characters that'll make up everything you need for kind of like 99 point whatever percent fluency. And there's going to be exceptions to that, and you're going to come in new characters all the time. But, there is an end to like how many you generally have to learn to feel very comfortable engaging with most material.
Yeah, this is also something very similar when we're used to motivating our students. We say like, we listed the numbers, right? The first 200 most frequently used characters take up to about 50% of the things like you're going to encounter daily, and the first 1,000 takes up to 85%, and like you said, 3,000, that's a milestone, right? It takes up 99%, like of the things you're going to encounter. So I think all the students, all the learners would be very happy to hear it actually gets easier.
I really think it does.
You really think so, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say I would tone it a little bit down for. I wish it's that from my experience, it's that it's not that linear process. We see the students have ups and downs all the time. Yeah, which you phrase it as like different challenges, which is true. So at the very beginning, I think when you have a good start, when you use the right tool, when you have the right instruction, the right teachers to guide you, the first few lessons or the first learning progress is very, very amazing, because it's easy, simple, full of knowledge and novelty. So you started with like a line means E, right? One, and 2 lines at 2, and you were like, wow, that easy.
Yeah. Cracked it. I know it. I know how to do it.
And then also you do things like, oh my God, this totally makes sense. You can make up your own stories, right? We do use a lot of stories to help students remember those letters. Of course, like the historical things matters, but you can create your own stories. Like if you learn the character from, like one of our students came up with this. He learned the character men, which like is a door, right? And then he learns the other character, which is wen, like to ask. But it's like the same character as the men, and with a口, the mouth inside, right? So his story goes like, oh my God, of course, to ask is like to knock on the door of the knowledge. So that's like all those stories are so amazing. So you think, wow, my God, like characters are amazing. And then like later you were like, after the first 200 characters, you were like, what? It's not every characters make sense, right? And they're so similar. And then, there's so many strokes. It's just like more complicated. And then once you get to advanced levels, some characters are so simple, only 3 strokes, but why it has so many meanings, right? It can combine it with different words, and then so all those kind of challenges. So I would say I hope the characters are. I think a lot of students the nice part would be a lot of students actually assume learning characters will get more harder, but it actually doesn't, because they thought all the characters are arranged in the very basic ones are with less strokes, and more advanced or formal ones they're with more strokes, which is not true. So it doesn't matter. It's combined. Either you're at a beginner level or advanced level, the strokes are actually from simple to complicated. You will meet them all, because when you learn language, all the materials or things, topics they're arranged in the frequency of you're going to encounter in the daily life, and also related to topics you're going to learn. So which that is the good part. It definitely not get harder, but it definitely has different challenges at different stages. Yeah.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, I mean, it's a process. And I do think of the intermediate plateau, this,
Oh, yeah.
kind of like
Yeah.
where it's you're in this phase where there's still so much new to encounter, and it's like, oh, I have so much more to learn, and then you end up seeing, or you like open up a news article or something and you see like, oh, here's a bunch of characters that are outside of the 3,000 most frequent characters, and these things happen. But I do think it's it's a process, and if we certainly at times like that, I think it's really important that we actually step back and maybe look back at how far we've come. Open up a beginner textbook or something, or go look at the 300 most common characters and realize like, oh my gosh, I can recognize 50% of the language, because that stuff you've already mastered. So it is really good. Like when things get difficult or whatever, I think it's, this is a part of the process. You can get through it, and maybe that's a good time to do a little bit deeper analysis, or to go back and maybe create a mnemonic for yourself and come up with a memory hook. How do I distinguish between these two characters that look really similar? All right, well, maybe it's time for a story. And you don't have to do it all the time, but that can be a really good method to really kind of set that straight in your brain and just say, all right, we're going to, focus in. Let's get over this difficulty here. And like you said, there's certainly ups and downs. It's in that process. And that's just something that we all kind of face along the way.
Yeah, I really like when you say like, don't forget how far you've been now, like look back, see what you've achieved. I think learning language is definitely a journey, and it's a long journey, and probably sometimes it's lonely, especially now a lot of our students are learning just online, right? You can't come to China to really use it. So really I like your idea about like how you look back and don't forget why you started this journey in the first place, and like really celebrate it for your achievement. And also you mentioned when you started mixing up characters, what can you do? Started analyzing a little bit. Do you want to talk a little bit more about this? Because this is also something we saw our students really like when they're at the intermediate level or up, they really started mixing up similar characters. Yeah. Are there any methods you can share?
Yeah. So I think in this stage, there's a couple different things that we can do, and there's a couple of things that I've done that I like to do that is really effective, and some of them they take a little bit of time, but I think it's important. Like in Skritter, or kind of in like flashcard land, some of these things end up being called like leeches, right? They grab onto you, and you see them over and over again, and you get to this stage where you're almost like frustrated with yourself, like, why can't I get this straight? And I think one thing that we can do is, kind of think about it as like, imagine we're athletes and we're trying to improve this skill, then maybe it might be, some mistake analysis. So looking in, and maybe it's on a piece of paper, your teacher has circled the character you got wrong. And rather than just glossing over that point and saying, yeah, I got it wrong, okay, I'll get it right next time, go in and try and figure out, why did I make this mistake? Almost unpack it. Did I make this mistake? Did I write a character did I write a character that is similar to the character that I was trying to produce? And just by identifying that and going, oh yeah, here I really wanted to write, button, but I wrote T, and simplified, it's, you're missing like the renzipong. Is that the mistake that I made? Okay, I just confused these two characters for a minute. Or maybe it's, I totally got like I like made up a character. I thought it was these two components together, and it turns out it's not. Just like I totally, maybe you just wrote a completely, same pronunciation, just a completely different character. It's not that necessarily like mixed up two similar characters. You just were off the mark there. But taking the time to go in and really process this information, and it doesn't need to be, you don't need to spend hours and hours on this, but even like 5-10 minutes of really focused study can really help in that regard of just identify your mistakes. Don't write them off as just like, hey, I made this mistake. How can I improve in the future? And I think by taking that time and going in a little bit deeper, you will find that you start to clean up some of those mistakes a little bit. I think while doing those things, that is a great time and opportunity to really start looking at and analyzing, like look at the character, maybe not your mistake character, but look at the character that you're trying to write, deconstruct it, hey, what's the form again? What's the, what's the meaning component of this? Is this the sound component? Maybe where does that component fit into other characters? Trying to like jog your memory there about that kind of stuff. What's the structure? And use mnemonics, things like that. And then I think that over time, another big thing is just like, depending on how much time you're spending on this process or on studying Chinese, sometimes it really is just a tendency of like, we need to have a little bit more exposure inside of context. So I remember definitely in that intermediate stage when things were struggling, maybe it's because I wasn't reading, I wasn't like reading and being exposed. I knew it inside of the textbook materials, but then I maybe didn't see these characters outside that much. And it's like, okay, well, I should probably spend some more time reading and interacting with the language in that kind of way or whatever it is. But I think that those are some pretty good strategies that we can employ for when we start making, mixing up similar characters. It really is like digging in, doing some error analysis and trying to figure out like the root cause of this and being kind with yourself too. Mistakes happen all the time. It's okay. But if we spend the time, then we can learn something and gain some insights rather than just being like, I made the mistake. Okay, well, try better next time. Stop, take a moment, look at it and see if you can improve.
Yeah, I like what you said, be kind to yourself. Like people make mistakes. Like one thing I want to add, sure, is like if you mixing characters, this happen a lot to Chinese people as well, even the native speakers. Especially when you're sending like text messages or email, because like we all use pinyin now, right? And you choose the characters. But there's so many characters under the same pinyin. So if you're quick or hurry, like it's very easy, you just choose the wrong ones. So it's really, really very common.
Well, we do this in our native language all the time, right? Like it's not just Chinese people. Just every day, every email, it's like, I'll write that, and then you could go back and edit, and But I think that like when it's native, when we're doing it in our own language, we're so much more forgiving of our own mistakes, right?
Forgiving.
No, of course we're unconsciously we're making mistakes all the time, right? But I think like we make these mistakes and then we just kind of brush it off and move on.
And I do understand like as a beginner or like more like her intermediate level, what kind of like mistakes you will make. Like once like because when at the beginner level when you learn characters, you actually not necessarily learning the one by one. It comes always appear in like words, right? So for example, if you learn the word to know somebody, like 很高兴认识你, so you always do the 认识 together. But later, like because there are two characters, they are going to appear in different words. But it's always like come together, 认识 So when it's like 识字, you will always say 认字 because you started with the first one. So those kind of situations, you can break words into like those kind of like word you're very familiar with into characters again, and then really study it, focus on the individual characters. And the other one is like typing when like you choose the wrong characters. So for example, when you do 汉字, you want to do 汉字like usually it's not the first word comes under the pinyin. You will have 汉字, which is like means muscular man, right? And then another 汉字, which means sweat. So it's very easy to like choose those ones. But like those kind of time, I think it's like you just need to really take a moment to think about what are the like right ones. And then like there's another trick. It's actually we have tools you can help. So like you can Google like what's this like the Chinese characters correction tools. So if you are, this is more for advanced, I guess, like when you write a formal email or just a long conversation you want to send, especially related to work, you want to double check if all your grammars, characters are right. So in Chinese, we do have those kind of tools as well. So you can use tools to help you to use the machine to help you to auto-correct as well. So that would be a trick, like for some students, advanced students, you can use as well.
Yeah, certainly. I love that.
Yeah,
it's like our, it's like the Grammarly word editors, whatever,
Yeah, there's the English parts, I think, are more like maybe popular, but people might do not know like Chinese, we have similar tools as well. Yeah. Okay, so lastly, we do prepare some like her character handwriting, so especially handwriting characters from different people on our social media. So we're going to talk about those writings. Yeah. So I would say like first like how to talk to discuss those kind of characters. Maybe we can talk a little bit about if all those characters are correct, and then we can talk about what style do you think they have. And would suggest something fun, but maybe I don't know if we're being too bored. Like because in Chinese we have a saying called 字如其人, which means like your writing reflects your personality. Can we guess what kind of personality those people are? Like
I feel like we should. I feel like we should try.
Yeah, yeah. Let's see. Tell us if we did it right or not. Eh? So 第一个, the first one. Yeah. Do you see any like I think like I immediately see a few like her characters. It's like her that can be corrected a little bit. I just think like it's easier for me as a teacher, right? You always like see the mistakes first.
You jump out, right? Yeah. So what's jumping out to you? I'm looking at. I think we have.
The first word jump to my like catch my eyes are the word 别人, the 别, other people, 别人, like the 别, it's like her. If you look at the component,
there's like a dao.
Actually, it's dao is not.
Yeah.
It's not. It's here. It's the dao, but it's actually a li, right? Li strength here.
And then the knife is on the right hand side instead. Yeah, we got two knives in here, but we only want one.
Yes. So it's like because it's like the ling part, right? It's related to strength. So this is the first one, caught my eyes, and the second one is like the 浪费, the word 费. So the top, all the strokes need to be stretched out instead of just like here, it didn't really go out.
But I think certainly in general, when I see this piece, I think that the thing that strikes me is. On the positive side, I do sense a lot of this. To me, is someone who has, I think they have pretty good handwriting. Like their stroke order looks really good. They are also getting into some like 行书, 草书, like a little bit more cursive style. I think like the does, for example, really strike me as like really well written in terms of having a little bit more of a calligraphy style. In general, like. It's, maybe the structure or like the space. Some characters, the like Mei, for example, 没想过, that like the 三点水 on the left is like, we might want to bring that, stretch that out a little bit more so it's a little bit more left-right balanced in that way. But I think in general, looking at this, there's some really good, really nice flowing strokes here for, good efficient writing. In terms of some of the things like this, to me, this is like classic. Like this is probably how I would be writing a lot of stuff if I'm like quickly producing. I'm not trying to write perfect, exact. What would it be, a 楷书, but more of a just a handwriting style. I think it's a great job there.
Yeah, great. I love you. I like your positive energy here. I think the first one like apparently from a very advanced student. And like you said, like let's do something more fun. Like let's see, like what do you see here from the personality? So I would say, like you said, like it seems like not too deliberate, right? On purpose to submit something to us. It's just like something very practical. So I would say this person probably is like quite like down to earth, practical. And then when we like it's a bit superficial, but in Chinese, when you look at the words to reflect the personality, you actually look at like the size of the words the person writes, and then the structure, how balanced it is, and then like because like Chinese are like 方块字, square characters, right? But so you do have like sharp angles, but somebody will not go too sharp, it will be more mild. So we do use those kind of like clues to see like just for fun, like how the personality would
gentle be. Yes, this is a gentle soul, I think, a little bit more rounded. not and maybe the pencil is accentuating that a little bit, but I do think a little bit more rounded and mild tempered probably would be my guess. 你觉得男的还是女的？
哦，对，还有男女，对不对？So because we both agree it's a bit mild, and then like if I say it's from a girl, it sounds a little bit like kind of stereotype.
Maybe that's not important. It's
The
inside,
gender,
maybe.
yeah. That would be like the personality would be somebody more like you said, more
I think.
gentle, down to earth. Yeah.
Relaxed, and I think good. Like it definitely looks like this is written without too much. There's not focusing on individual characters here, right? It's probably more focused on writing sentences and producing some more longer form work. So, which already I think in itself speaks to a confidence level there in how they're approaching their character writing. I really particularly like yuan yin the yin, or the 从. I really like the does. That's definitely how I write my does too. Bring them together. Okay. Yeah, the just kind of, we don't need all those strokes. Just put them together. Just write it cursive style, a little bit sloppy, but very legible in the fact that the stroke order is correct, right? So it's still super easy to read.
Yeah, like very clear and also efficient. Yeah, I know you really like efficient stuff. Okay, let's look at the second one. So I'll still be like a teacher. I'll point out the mistake first. So here for the handwriting, the first word, 这, actually the 走之底, the radical. In handwriting, we do not do that way. This is more of a printed version. So you will do it like in the other way, like looks like a number 3, that kind. So this is a very common mistake. Yeah, and here it says 这是用左手写的, something more fun, eh? That's more based on the content. Deliberate say
lefties have it hard. Lefties have it hard no matter what. I know it's tricky.
Left hand,
I think in jet.
Go ahead.
Left-handed.
Left-handed could be left-handed or like just to tease us, right? So I would say this person is more creative.
Yeah.
And then,
certainly. Like 开玩笑, maybe. I don't know.
And
but
then
I think
some is quite rounded cursive, but some are very sharp. So I think the personality can go between, maybe for something this person really standing for, it can be very strong-minded, firm, but also a very sensitive heart sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, I think in general, if I was looking at this and trying to think about ways that we could improve overall, like the handwriting output, I would say it's a good time to start focusing. I would focus on the balance and structure of the characters. One thing that I see often with, and this I think is a good example of, we're using up all the space on this writing grid. So it's like all the characters kind of uniformly big in their components. So on 是, for example, that top part is like really big and really long, but maybe we want to have that a little bit, it could be a little bit smaller and kind of more centralized. And then our middle stroke that's below that could be a little bit longer, so that we're giving a little bit more balance to the components. I think the is as well. That left side probably wants to be a little bit bigger than the right side to give us that. And I think in general here, and this is something, like I said, I see it in a lot of handwriting where we have this tendency to use that whole space. But I think if we think of each individual character as like a piece of art, then we probably want to give them a little bit of room to breathe. So we don't have to, just because we have all that space there doesn't mean that you necessarily all have to use it. And by adding and being kind of mindful of the space around components, we can really let a character breathe a little bit and give that really nice, distinct, kind of clean, polished look to our writing.
对, I see. That's why we emphasize the balanced structure of characters, right? So it doesn't mean if you started with this part, it takes the largest space, in the grade. So you really need to know how balanced they are, the different components.
Yeah, I think if it's okay.
Go ahead. Okay.
I was just gonna say, if this is a lefty already, I do totally, and not a joke of a lefty, then it's so tricky. Being a left-handed writer for Chinese can be tricky. Your ink ends up bleeding, and it's very hard to see what you're writing because you're covering your hand. It's its own little struggle. So, 加油!
加油! The last one, looks like it focuses more on the aesthetic part. Those characters, if you can tell, right? Because different stroke, it starts with strands, and then it has sometimes it's thin, sometimes it's thicker. This is more of like a calligraphy. It falls into the calligraphy scope.
Yep.
Yeah, also point out the correctness from the teacher perspective. The only thing which is wrong here is more, the more, the 黑 part, the two dots, it's not flat. There should be a bit of angle. So that's the correct part. But talking about the style and the personality, what do you think? Something for fun, not seriously.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a artistic, I think pretty open personality. Maybe just paying attention to these, I think this is someone who is paying attention to maybe detail oriented in some of a lot of these strokes, and things are very you can tell there is a mindfulness while writing this of stroke weight and thickness, and am I applying pressure here and letting it off there and trying to create some of these clean strokes. I look at the zhs, for example, and that first stroke starting there is super clean and very written in a way of if we were writing gangbi, like a ballpoint pen in that style. And my favorite character is probably just looking at it's tough. That 水乳不及, that G looks really good. The 会人, 会 also looks really nice.
Yeah, this one actually very hard for me to judge if this person is a beginner or more advanced, because the content is quite advanced, and then the style is quite really if you emphasize the beautiful aesthetic part, you should be really advanced. But the thing is it's not stable.
No, it's not.
Creation.
So this I think is it possible that this is two people writing together?
Yeah, it's some parts that are very nice, right? The same 知道的知, a few 知's are very nice, but
yes.
For example, the last 知 of the first line is not balanced. So it's not stable, right?
So we have this 水乳不及, and then after it's I think we're being messed with.
I don't know, her, yeah. So Yap would tell us the answer in the end, and then tell us if we did it right or not. And how do you feel about those things? Yeah.
But I think it can be, it's for anyone that's submitting and doing things like this, it can be very tricky to, it's depending on how you feel about, other people looking at your stuff. So already it's really cool and impressive to be sharing work and seeing feedback. I sometimes, when I do it on my Instagram, for example, it's so funny, the comments that come in. You have a wide range of people commenting on various things. And so you just got to take it with a grain of salt. As long as we're trying to have fun and things, it depends on what we're trying to achieve, right? But hopefully everyone that did this was super fun. Yeah,
I think it actually shows kind of a kind of bravery already to submit those things. And
yes,
I think
absolutely.
of course we can give really serious suggestions, but of course this is more of we want to encourage people learning Chinese is fun, it's possible, it brings benefits, and there's a lot of ways there to help this happen. And then so don't be shy. If you're really into learning Chinese, try different methods, try to really let your teachers know what are the best way for you to learn, and then try different tools like Skritter, or just be open-minded and be brave, and you will have tons of fun, and of course learn fast and efficient.
Yeah. Certainly. Well, and if it's okay, if people are looking for efficiency and do want to get into handwriting, one thing that we have inside of Skritter is we created a character course. And so it's 16 episodes. Each one is 5 minutes long. We cover like 150 characters and components, and the theory to learn like thousands more. So probably very similar to the approach that you take with a lot when it comes into character recognition. But yeah, we cover, the evolution of characters, and we talk about them. We talk about word formation and shape and structure and stroke order. And it's like a really great, it's one of these things where probably took me 4 or 5 years to get to the point where I knew all this stuff. And then Ula and I and our team, we put this together, and it's like, this is everything we wished we would have learned in the beginning, and we just bundled it up inside of the app as something that you could study. So if that's someone's interested in, I would highly recommend like starting there and binge watch it while you're getting ready to go, and then you can start crushing it and writing your characters and having a lot of fun. Because learning Chinese is so much fun, right? So we don't get bogged down in that stuff.
Yeah, 对，非常好。